Hi, I'm Richard Cassidy, and in 2015 I was diagnosed with skin cancer. That was a shock to me, to my wife and to my girls. My eldest daughter, now a doctor, at the time was a teenager, and we were actually away in Amsterdam on holiday, and because they were teenagers we shared a room, 4 of us in the room. And I, one day, was walking around without a top on, and my daughter Charlotte said to me, "Dad, have you checked that lump out? You've got a mole on your chest." And I'd noticed this mole on my chest on the right-hand side, primarily when I was in work, wearing a shirt. I used to work in a bank, so I was always suited and booted, shirt and tie. And I'd noticed that it was something that I rubbed from time to time, but I never sort of thought of it as anything to worry about. So anyway, Charlotte said, "No, you need to get it checked out." So that was February 2015. As blokes do, we don't always get things checked out as quickly as we should, or indeed get them checked out. And it was in the May that Charlotte again said to me, "Dad, have you been to the doctor?" I said, "No, I will. And I actually went to see the doctor about something else. I think it was my blood pressure. And the doctor actually said to me, "Is there anything else bothering you at the moment?" And I said, "Well, actually," I said, my daughter's pointed out this mole I've got on my chest." So he said, "Well, let me have a look." And he said, "Right," he said, "I've got a slot on Friday, I'll take that off for you." Now, GPs don't do that now, but then if they have the training, they'll actually remove moles within their practice. And again, me, being a bloke, said, "Well, I'm quite busy on Friday. It's my last day in my current job before I move roles, and I've got a really busy day ahead of me." Again, in hindsight, what was I actually doing on that Friday? Yes, I was clearing my desk, but it was my last day and I was going for a drink with my mates. So I put it off, but I did go the following week, and he put me in for an appointment the following Thursday. And I went along in my lunchtime, and I had this small procedure where the mole was removed from the side of my chest. And the GP said, "Right, we'll send this off for analysis, and if there's anything to worry about, we'll get back in touch with you." So time moved on, and I think it was probably about 4 weeks later, the phone call from my wife, and I was in work. She said, "Oh, the GP's been in touch with me, wants to speak to you." So I thought, well, that's strange, they've got my number. So anyway, I rang the GP practice, and they said, "Come in, if you can come in at 6:30 tonight." Now, as you know, with GP practices, getting an appointment on the same day is pretty rare, and it was back in 2015. So I said, "What's this about?" "Oh, it says the doctor wants to talk to you about the results from your mole removal." So I said, "I'm on my way now." The next thing is the doctor calls me in, and he sits me down, and he has 2 pieces of paper in front of me. And at that point, he basically says, "Well, your mole is actually skin cancer, superficial spreading melanoma." At which point, I'm not really sure I heard everything that he told me at that time. And I think he was aware of that. So what he actually said to me was, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah," because that's what we say. But he did give me my histology report, which at least I could then look back on. And again, you put on a brave face. "Thanks very much, Doc. What happens next?" You'll get a phone call from the hospital. You'll go and see one of the consultants, and they will then discuss with you what the next stages are. And at that point, I think so in 2015, Charlotte was studying for her A-levels. So she was at home, so I couldn't go home. I rang my wife, The minute you mention those words cancer, or that word cancer, that's when everything changes. That's when emotion kicks in. And, you know, Alison said to me, you can't go into work like that. And I said, well, I can't go home like that because Charlotte will know something's up. And until we know what's going to happen, I can't burden the kids with that. So I said, I'll be fine. By the time I get back to work, I'll be fine. Anyway, I got to work, and you know, just as I said to the GP in the morning, I'm not going to get work done today. Well, I didn't. I went and collared one of my mates, and I said, I need to go for a pint. So we went to the pub, and I told him what had happened. And I think that's something which, you know, it made me feel better actually being able to talk about it to one of my mates rather than to someone who I loved. You can be a little bit more matter of fact about things, and to a certain extent, a bit more light-hearted about it. So that was the day of diagnosis. That night I got home from work, house was quiet, and the phone rang at 6:30, and Charlotte answered the phone. Dad, it's for you, it's the hospital. At which point I thought, well, that was quick. I wasn't expecting that today. And actually, I've now got to think about what I'm going to tell Charlotte. So that was basically, we need to see you in 2 weeks' time. So I think this was a Tuesday. So literally 2 weeks later, I had an appointment at the dermatology unit at Broad Green. I come off the phone, and Charlotte said, what's that about? And my response was, oh, it's fine. They just want to discuss the results of the mole surgery. To which she said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, if it was serious, they'd want me in quicker, wouldn't they? Obviously, I knew more than she did at that stage. We'll jump forward because really, you know, I went to that appointment 2 weeks later. I sat with the registrar, and they discussed with me what was going to happen next with regards to surgery being the first intervention, which they would start the ball rolling with moving me into that next sphere. But as part of that, they also said, right, after this appointment, we've got a specialist cancer nurse who will sit down with you and talk to you about what to expect, and that really to sort of, and give support and documentation, literature, so that you can actually have a little read about what's going on, and the support groups that are out there, you know, such as Macmillan and people like that, which was, you know, really helpful, and it made it a lot easier to talk about. What they also said to me, and this was really important for me and for my wife, and I also now say to other people, you'll now be living your life in 2 week stages, in 2 week sets, i.e. something will happen in 2 weeks and then something will happen in 2 weeks. And that's pretty much what happened. You know, within 2 weeks of that appointment, I had notification of another appointment for my pre-op. And then I was in for surgery. And my surgery took place on July 15th, 2015, at Whiston Hospital. And that entailed a number of procedures. One was into the nuclear lab, where they inject some dye into the site of where the mole was. And the idea of that is to actually understand where the fluid from that part of the body drains into the lymph nodes, so that they can determine which lymph nodes they're going to take, if they need to take any. And also to do so that's the first stage, and then they mark you up for that, and then you go for your theatre later on. So I think I went down to theatre about 4 o'clock. I came back at 7 with what I now call my shark bite, which is a 6-inch scar on the side of my chest. A 6-inch scar from a mole which I could only describe as a worn rubber off the end of a pencil. So a pink rubber on the end of a pencil, worn down. That's the best way I could describe the mole I had. And the result of that was a 6-inch scar plus two 2-inch scars where they remove lymph nodes. I was very, very lucky that everything they took in that surgery was clear of cancer. And that was, that was another 2 weeks to find out that everything they'd taken away was clear. And from that then I was under Broad Green Hospital for the next 5 years on 3-month and 6-monthly checks, which they checked me for lumps and bumps, new moles. And over those 5 years, and even since, I've had other moles removed, which have all proven to be non-cancerous. But it's that ongoing diligence to make sure that there isn't anything there. And I think that's one of the things, and there's plenty of, in my case, there's plenty of melanoma groups out there who, we all support each other to check ourselves as well. So, it's not just looking for new moles or things that have changed, but it's also feeling where your lymph nodes are, which is your armpits and your groin, for any lumps or bumps under the skin, which may be of concern. So they're the really sort of important things to sort of think about and get yourself checked with. I suppose the day that I found out that everything they'd removed was clear, it was a strange day, and some people might actually find this quite bizarre, but I actually thought that they would come back to me and say, we're going to have to do more treatment. And I can't really explain where my head was at that time, but it might sound strange that I found it disappointing that was it, that they weren't going to do anything else for me. Whereas I know for everybody else's perspective, it was massive relief, to the point where obviously we told the girls and I told my extended family, and my baby sister actually messaged me later that night and said, I haven't stopped crying all evening. And it's not crying because I'm upset, it's crying with joy that actually you're going to be okay. So again, it's understanding that actually, yes, you're the one with the illness, but it's the impact it has on so many other people, your family and your friends. It's a lot of us forget how close we are to a lot of our friends and the support that we give them and they give us. We've got to make sure that we carry on living our lives, but don't be afraid about talking about what's going on in your life and how you're feeling. Not just about your physical being, but your physical being has an impact on your mental well-being. But I would always say to you, the NH staff are fantastic. They know what you're going through, because that's what they do day in, day out. And they'll understand what you're concerned, or they'll understand why you're concerned. But it's important that you tell them what you're concerned about, and then they can direct you. They can either help you there and then, or they can point you in the direction of someone else who can help you. And I know as a kid, I was burned. Whether that caused my cancer, I don't know. Whether it was something else I did, whether it was going on sunbeds when I was 20 because I was going to the Caribbean because I thought, I'll get my body used to going out in the sun. Doesn't work. I can't get my body used to going out in the sun. I'm a ginge. It's not going to work. I'm going to go red, and that's going to cause skin damage. So just wear sun cream. It's not hard, and it's not clever not to. So, yeah, final message from me is slap on the sun cream, especially the worldy bits.